So it's a great privilege to be with you all today. We're going to have a very timely topic. Just to give you a little bit more about the Iran 2040 project. It was started around 2016. It's a hub here at Stanford focused on doing research on different facets of development here at Stanford. What you will see today is actually one of the great things about this project, which is focusing, working and collaborating with experts across the country, across the world, on topics that really impact Iran, and being able to hone in and focus and use data to shed light on issues affecting Iran in a very empirical way. Today's speakers are a good representation of exactly the scholarship and the expertise that we need to study these topics. Here we have Dr. Kaveh Madani. He is the director of the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health. He has an extensive bio that you can find on the event page and on our website. But I'll kind of summarize, otherwise we'll be here all night. Here, and I have here with us Dr. Mohsen Mesgaran. He is an assistant professor in the Department of Plant Sciences at University of California, Davis, and a senior research fellow at the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health. He also has an extensive bio that I will have to skip for the sake of time, but if you would join me in welcoming our guest today. One more note about the event. It will be a discussion here, and I'll be kind of directing questions to our guests here. If you have questions, please submit them using this link, or you can find the link through the QR code. It will be a Google form, so if you found your way here, signed up for the event, you're familiar with that. And I'll be looking at the questions, and I'll be directing them appropriately and consolidating them. So feel free to send them at any point, and I'll be checking that. And yeah, let's move into the substance. Okay, so the topic is the water, agriculture, and environment nexus, and the conundrum that we have in Iran. So I'll start with an easy question to you, Dr. Madani. Water, agriculture, and environment, which one should we say?
Very easy. Very easy question. Thanks for having me here. Thank you so much for coming and joining us to discuss this very important matter. A question is a very familiar question. I mean, it's we keep talking about it and we keep fighting over it. But I think it's a wrong question to begin with. It's we have to save Iran and rescue Iran, and we have to, in order to help water, environment, and agriculture, we have to understand the causes of the problems, the interrelated dynamics of these three sectors. And if we do so, then we have a path to improving the situation. It's a very long path. It's a marathon. There would not be any overnight solution, no quick solution, no quick fixes, because if you degrade the environment, if you invest in infrastructure, if you set up different systems, you cannot undo things very quickly. And indeed, this is a discussion that we have had many years ago. I wrote about it in Iran papers about this wrong question, which has led to a competition between these sectors. Environmentalists fighting with each other, activists from different regions fighting with each other over water, people, the Ministry of Agriculture, Jihad Agriculture, fighting with the people in the Ministry of Environment, and then people in the Water Resource Management Company, and then Department of Environment. And many of these people are good people and have good intention. What we forget is, why do we even use the water? What do we need it for? Why do we want to keep the agriculture sector active? What are we after? And I think something important comes up here, and that's the issue of self-sufficiency, for example, that we always use to defend our bad plans in the ag sector, even to mask the bad decisions we're making in the water sector and so on. I tend to believe that if we focus on the farmers and the livelihood of farmers and improving the lives of the farmers, then we can help all those sectors. This was a discussion actually I had in one of the committees of the Supreme Water Committee or Council, the national committee that brings all the ministers together, the vice president and others. And that was the thing, that in Iran, we are not actually achieving these goals. Not only we don't achieve water sustainability, self-sufficiency, and environmental sustainability, but also we are degrading the lives of these people, and our farmers keep getting, I think their lives keep getting worse, and they become more and more vulnerable, and that's where we are headed. But speaking of self-sufficiency, maybe I can switch to, Mohsen can take over, and this discussion about self-sufficiency versus food security.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the introduction and thank you for being here. This issue of agriculture and self-sufficiency, it goes back to 4 decades ago with the ambitious goal or a dream, or I may refer to illusion, actually, of self-sufficiency, that we should produce everything within the borders of our country, without really looking at what resources are available, the water resources, the land resources. So for agricultural production, you need land, water, people, machinery, and some other inputs like fertilizer, herbicides. So when you talk about self-sufficiency, is it just the production of wheat, or it's a change? You need machinery to till the soil. You need fertilizers. So a good example is fertilizer. We are importing 80% of our phosphorus. So if you produce the whole wheat in Iran, you're still dependent on fertilizer from outside. And so when you talk about self-sufficiency, you need to define it, which part of it you're talking about. And self-sufficiency has been kind of confused with food security, or being used as a exchange for food security, but these are totally 2 different concepts. Food security doesn't talk about the place or origin of the food. It's defined by FAO as a situation where all people at all time, they have physical and economic access to nutritious, safe water and in a sustainable way. So it doesn't ask if it's eggplant or tomato that you're using being produced in Iran or another country. It's that the people should have always access to the food, and it's mainly an economic. A lot of times it relates to economy, the purchase power. A good example is meat. We are almost self-sufficient in meat production in Iran. It's more than 94% of the meat is produced in Iran. So it's self-sufficient. But why we have observed this huge drop in meat consumption in Iran from a per capita use of about 16 kilograms per person to now below 4 or 5 kilograms. There is meat in butcheries and stores. It's that people don't have money to go and buy it. So it's not about the production. It's the economic power that is declined over time because of reasons that Dr. Madani knows better than me. So we should not mix these 2 concepts together and go for food security rather than self-sufficiency. And I can expand on it, I think, later on if needed, but I think.
Great.
Yeah.
No, thank you both. I'm going to go a little bit back to the topic of water, and I'll show some data based on that is available on our website. These are based on papers that are published or some of the data dashboards that we have. So first of all, we know that Iran is generally speaking, most of Iran is fairly arid. So we do kind of, we're not very wealthy when it comes to water resources. And the other thing is that over time, the amount of precipitation has been declining. It has kind of gone down over time. On this graph, you can see this. That's the change that we've experienced between 1980 and 2010. So clear, I mean, these are nice, but also we kind of know, that water is a problem. That scarcity of water is an issue. We have, ongoing, tensions around water. So I kind of want to go to the idea of is the ongoing issue that we're having with water, is it an inevitable? Is it from mismanagement? If you could talk a little bit about the environmental factors, the climate change aspect, all those things that kind of go into the current moment that we're in struggling with water.
Good point, and I think it's important and very, very relevant. So to begin with, Iran is not a water-rich country, right? And compared to the countries in the region, or like the Middle East, actually, it's not. The situation is not that bad, and it was way better than today. Some decades ago in terms of per capita water availability comparing to the neighboring countries. Don't separate Turkey from the equation, but compare Iran with the rest. Iran was not doing bad. Now, if you look at the same region, we have also this richness in energy resources, oil and gas, and that delusion is rooted in the fact that oil money coming in, we think that we can address our shortcoming by more investment, and most importantly, by investment in technology. So not understanding the fact that water can be a limit to growth, that's what we did. And we can also debate whether this is an Islamic Republic thing or this existed even before the revolution. And in some of the debates or interviews of the late Shah of Iran, you can see that in questions about when he's being asked about the oil price, there are answers that he or narratives. In his discourse, he refers to the wheat price as so this sort of a fight. And being concerned about food security was there, and the dream to do this and existed in the region because Saudi Arabia also made a lot of investments. Egypt, you see what happened to Saddam Hussein when he was in a war. So there was a valid concern there, together with this maybe strategic mistake that yes, we can address this issue and through spending money. And that still, I think, that sort of wrong thinking is there, and that delusion is there. Still, people think that by just more investment in this sector, this problem can be solved through employing more technology. So I think it is important to understand that this thing was there, and in many other countries also made this mistake. But then there is a revolution in the country, fight with the rest of the world, a war that even makes this thing more. So self-sufficiency becomes a slogan, like it's a revolutionary slogan that a lot of people defend, and then it becomes a justification for a lot of bad decisions, and even corruption in when it comes to some sectors. So now going back to your question, so we are a water-short country, and then the question that we have is, so if you are not rich, do you go and make your investments to become rich in a sector where your physics are wrong, or do you invest in your competitive advantage to be able to do trades with the rest of the world, and then give something and take something back? We are not water rich. Europeans are water rich. Their desire to produce food at home is different from us, and that's always a question. Why don't they allocate so much water to the same crops? Because then there is an economic element there, and this thinking of, so where do you invest? If I'm handicapped and I don't have two legs, do I invest in becoming a runner, or do I don't know, invest in some other things? I want to be the best artist, and so that is the thing that I think we got wrong. Now Iran has water. We always say that there's no shortage of water anywhere in the world. There's shortage of cheap water. If you want to put this into crop production and do like, I don't know, like you think you can do anything, and culturally and all those things, we keep washing our rugs and washing the streets and swiping the street with water, so that's not going to work anymore. And then gradually the system must become more and more efficient, because you cannot do things, but then it can be costly, because who do you take this water from is the question. If you're taking it back from the poor, then you're struggling. So Iran made this a strategic mistake. Still we are there. Now, until maybe 3 years ago, my story made a lot of sense. But after the invasion of Ukraine, we saw food supply chain disruptions in the world. So a lot of countries actually got nervous about that definition of food security that doesn't care about the source of. Whereas when it comes to energy security, the source matters, right? And where do you import it from is part of the definition of energy security. So a lot of countries in the world are also now picking up this sort of thinking that Iran has, and then it's a question of how much of your basket can be dependent on foreign. And then, as you said, like, it's a whole chain. Maybe the final product can be produced at home. You can produce missiles at home too, but if you need the pieces here, from different parts of the world, you're still vulnerable. And then we also have now the trade wars. So we're based in Canada right now, a peaceful country, very friendly with the rest of the world, and now all of a sudden there are trade wars and people. So then I think in this sort of world, we might see more countries that think like Iran, and then Iran just had its neighbor, Iraq, reaching a point of wheat and oil trade. We had Qatar in the region, goes under embargoes of the Saudis, and the region, we see they struggled a lot, but that's the thing. It's a dynamic world. If you make the mistakes that the Canadians made or some other countries, and then you are vulnerable. And in a world that no one would be your permanently your friend or your enemy, you have to dance around. I mean, that's the art of diplomacy, and connecting it to security, ensuring that self-reliance, I would say, maybe khodet tekai instead of security or sufficiency. And then thinking about, okay, how do I create a package that includes all these elements? Because at the end of the day, even in the trade war, we see that some countries cannot be threatened. Like verbally you threaten them, but you back up, because then you realize that critical minerals are coming from this country and this other thing is coming from that country. I cannot mess with them. So that's the question for Iran or anyone who, in the region. It's like, what do you invest in? Like, what sort of trades you will invest in? Because clearly it is wrong to just ignore the fact that you're out of water. And you said, yes, climate change is making that region even more, I would say, like poor in terms of water access and water availability. Yet we cannot blame all these problems on climate change. But despite all of this, we can see that water consumption in Iran keeps increasing, and I think that's something to debate. Maybe.
Yeah. So, to some extent, I agree that within the past 3 years there have been changes in that may make us worry about how easily you can import food, but there has never been any sanction on food imports, and there's no sanction on that at all. North Korea is a good example. The most isolated country, never been sanctioned for food. They can import any type of food that they want. The reason they can't do it is because they don't have money. So even despite all the things happen, this trade war, I'm still not that much worried that people may do that. Any time that you have money, you can buy it. And it doesn't. And even another example is Pakistan. Pakistan is an exporter of food. They produce more than they need. But the poverty hunger index is about 15%. More than 15% of the population, they are hungry. And it has increased over time. So just producing a lot of food doesn't mean that it would be distributed among them, equally and in a fair way, because some people, they are poor, they can't afford it. So that's the reason I don't think just focusing on production would help. I'm not totally against actually self-sufficiency, particularly about wheat, because this has been self-sufficiency has been a kind of goal or ideology since the beginning of revolution. And I think if there is only one crop in Iran that we should be self-sufficient, is wheat. We have all the elements to be self-sufficient. It's the country of the habitat of origin for wheat. Iran is the center of origin. We have the highest genetic diversity of wheat in Iran. At UC Davis, we have 11,000 samples collected from Iran. They are there as the genetic material. And I have a very good colleague, a breeder, who is producing all sorts of wheat varieties like gluten-free. So we have the genetic materials. It's been there. But what happened? After 4 decades, they have not yet been able to be self-sufficient even in wheat. Yeah, 1 year they become self-sufficient and celebrated. The year after, the rain drops, then they import another 3 million or 4 million tons. If the statistics are correct, I don't know how reliable are. So why they haven't achieved this? If this is when the Islamic Republic has an ideology to go after something like missiles, or they go for it with full force, despite all sanctions, everything, they go for it and try to be successful. So why they haven't been successful with wheat? Despite we had the elements, we have the resources, and there have been no sanctions on improving wheat varieties, wheat yield. Why we haven't achieved that? So that's the sort of question I have, and why I think just focusing on self-sufficiency and being worried that we would be the target of sanctions is not, I think, a big issue. And even for wheat, based on the law in Iran, silos in Iran should have wheat for 100 days. So they should have enough wheat for 100 days. And I don't see really this is a big issue. They can produce enough wheat in Iran. Even if they put us on sanction that you can't import wheat, which has never happened, Iran should be able. They just need to reallocate the resources to wheat production. And I don't, a lot of people talk about wheat as the source of water issues in Iran, that water crisis or bankruptcy, as Dr. Madani has coined the term, is due to wheat self-sufficiency. I don't think that. I don't. That's the case. Wheat is a winter crop. Doesn't use that much water compared to summer crops. And I just saw a document, official report from Ministry of Jihad, Kishavarzi, that they have orchards, trees, apple. They are using, they account for 32% of water consumption in ag, and wheat is 11%. So that's the reason I don't think it's the wheat self-sufficiency as an issue. And again, if they want to be self-sufficient, they should be, and they should have already been self-sufficient in wheat.
So that's a very good point. Maybe you bring that thing.
Yes.
So exactly, I think this is a very important one about so where do I spend my water? How? And on what? So clearly there is limited amount of water. And even, again, we're using the example of Canada. Canada is struggling in some places because water is never unlimited anywhere. And then you have to make decisions. Now, that's the question to ask. And our study, maybe 2017 or 16, showed that so wheat is not the cause of the issue. So yes, you're more than welcome if cereal or specifically wheat is your target and it's something that makes you more comfortable, assured, maybe even 100 days is not enough, prolong that and then go for it. Do all in this case, and then discard other things, because what we see is agriculture production has increased in Iran by weight, right? And then when it comes to that the thing that you keep talking about, it's not much of a change, and it's even fluctuations down here. And then you have other things that are not strategic. Maybe we need less salad Shirazi and tomatoes and cucumbers and onions, right? So no offense to Shirazis in the room, but so those are not strategic crops for us. And then that can be this is something to ask. And now, but maybe we can talk about the dynamics of that. Why do we have this situation? Because farmers farm at the farm level, right? And they don't farm for your ideology or for what you are after, unless you create a mechanism that aligns the interests at the farm level with the national interest or security interest of the nation. And that's the problem. One thing though on the issue of sanctions, we got to be careful is that even if there is no sanction on food, we know the issue of trading, and as you said, like money, how do you release it? Like, how do you even transfer the money? And that has been an issue. So at the end of the day, even if a sector is exempt, and as we said, like food sector is not about food. If you're talking about wheat is something, but tractors are not provided, combines are not provided. And so even if that, so I think concerns should be there. Iran signs a deal with the United States tomorrow. That concern must be there. Anyone with real national interest should care about the food basket of the country. How healthy is it? How reliable and how resilient it is, and that's extremely important. But that's the thing. Where, how do I use my water? Which sector? What's the return on investment? And then it's economic return at the national level, return at the farm level. How do they benefit from it? And then also so then that you got an answer. Like, why do the Europeans have a bigger industrial sector, like when it comes to water use, but then less? Because you can buy cheap food, cheap labor, cheap resources of other countries and the African nations and the Pakistanis and the Indians, and then sell them expensive stuff, and then keep that mutual dependence in a way, but in somehow maybe unfair. Because you're not paying for the resources, you're not paying for the labor, and this gap keeps being there. And I think again, this is a trap that has been created by the Iranians for Iran, and as a result, not only we have not achieved that, but then the situation has got worsened, and the cost of that is declining groundwater resources, shrinking rivers, lakes, wetlands, subsiding land, desertification, dust storms, deforestation, and all those problems that we keep talking about, because we are still even not achieving that simple goal that we had defined.
If I may, I'm going to look a little bit at water usage in Iran. So, we have, and these are estimates, and there are some there's not agreement on all the kind of the figures here. There are not agreements on all the thresholds here, but to just give you a sense, there's about 380 billion cubic meters of let's say precipitation. Typically about 75% of that evaporates. That leaves you with, about 25 to 30%, which is the available water to use. We had a discussion about, you'll see those dotted lines. One of them is at 40%, one of them is at 60% of that available fresh water. Some, institutions, some scholars, some folks like to kind of set those as good boundaries of that are set for sustainable use of water. As you can see, that Iran's actually using over how much, and again, these are rough estimates, but Iran's using plenty of over how, all of its capacity of available fresh water. And you can see, you might actually have trouble seeing this, but that purple section of the water use is just household and industrial use, and the rest is agriculture. So, we hear people, policymakers talking a lot about how we should, take, less time in the shower and save water at home, but obviously that will have a limited impact on the amount of water that we use. The other kind of thing that we hear is the impact of technology, and here you also might have trouble seeing the difference between these two graphs, but the bottom one is the impact of technological adaptation based on some of the calculations that you can see in the paper that Dr. Mesgaran has co-authored on the amount of water used. So that was a long prelude, and here you'll see the how much of water goes to different use cases. The world average is about 70% for agriculture. Obviously varies across the board, and I want Dr. Madani to comment on that in a little bit. But Dr. Mesgaran, technology, economists love productivity gains and technology. Is technology our way out? And if not, if it's not, why is that the case?
Yeah, so definitely I'm not against technology. Actually, I'm at UC Davis. I'm using a lot of technology, sensors, AI. But there is a kind of overstating about the role of technology in alleviating the water issues in Iran, like modernizing irrigation, greenhouses, drainage, and so on. And we did the calculation actually, and it can only save about 7-8 billion cubic meter. So we are using about 86, 82, depending on the resources. Let's say 80 billion cubic meter is water is used. So if we use these technologies like pressurized irrigation, drip irrigation, and one reason that people have overestimated the role of this technology is that it would not necessarily result in water saving at the basin level. Maybe at the farm level, yes, but not at the basin level. What will happen, I have a very close relative that he is a farmer, and he put his wheat under drip irrigation. By the way, drip irrigation is not very common for wheat, but he did it. And guess what? He doubled the number of acres that he is now growing wheat. So there is no saving. Actually, back in the time, using furrow irrigation, traditional inefficient irrigation was more beneficial because you still get some return to the soil and to the groundwater. But now it's almost minimum. So there's going to be no water saving through this technique. So we need to be very careful. And this has happened in Urumia Basin when they used this pressurized irrigation system, and it increased. The number of acres increased, so there was no saving in water. Greenhouses, yes. A good example is for example, a cucumber. The average yield in Iran is about 20 tons per hectare. But if you grow the same cucumber in the greenhouse, it's 190 tons per hectare, and you will save 40,000 cubic meter. So it can save some water, but we did the calculation. It's not going to be even more than 1 billion cubic meter. We were kind of discussing it with Dr. Madani that even 7-8 is a huge number because it's equal to the whole amount of water used in urban areas. So it's still a big number, but it's not going to solve the issue that we have with these 86 or 80 billion cubic meter to reach a point at this 40%, 60%, which I know you don't like this thresholds. You can discuss your reasons. I do agree. It's not that because it's very context specific. So.
No, but that we're reaching a deal. So if you take the cucumbers and tomatoes to the greenhouses, then the Salat Shirazi problem would be solved.
Yes,
we use the water for wheat. But so I think so. One thing on the issue of again, because it's the context specific, right? Iran is a huge country. You're not talking about a small country like So this is not Bahrain or Qatar, right? You're talking about a huge country, and very diverse in terms of climate and soil and other things and resources. So if you talk about this big number, maybe you go back to your water availability or aridity, map. So then like where in the country are we talking about, right? So what you can do something in Gilan and Mazandaran and Kermanshah, but if you do the very same thing in Isfahan or Kerman, you're in trouble. So then when we discuss these numbers at the national level, they become misleading. So the first question you've got to ask is where in Iran are you talking about, right? And something can make sense here and not there. Like it can work in Idaho but not California. It can work in Utah but not. Not Nevada, so you got to understand, or it can work in Northern California, but not Southern California. So things can be different across the nation, and then those numbers become misleading. One of those issues is, okay, so only 6%, 7% of the water in the country is used in the urban sector. Even I saw people were asking Grok, Twitter AI, and then it was making a comment on this that shortening your shower doesn't do any good. But then let me ask you this: what is the percentage of water that goes to the urban sector in the city of Tehran, right? And then you have all these reservoirs around you that are dry. And then what is the cost of the water that goes into your pipe and the tap water that you have? It's nothing comparable in terms of cost with the water that the farmers take out of stream, right? So you have invested in infrastructure, you're treating that water, electricity use, everything. And then if you think about the net impact, it's huge actually. And then these numbers become misleading, and believe it or not, still we are debating. And in a country where people don't trust the system, even a narrative, like if you say, cut your water use at home, then they're like, you're an agent of the Islamic Republic, you're deviating and misleading people. The problem is somewhere else, it's the wheat. And then if they replace it with drip irrigation, they would solve the issue. And then you see that. And the drip irrigation efficiency improvement that people talk about as a solution of water shortage, as the first thing people think about, is this rebound effect that you talked about that is not even in Iran. Like in California, we had the same thing. In Australia, we had the same thing. Anywhere in the world we tried it, we had the same thing. FAO did a report on this, arguing this. This doesn't mean that the technology of improving efficiency is bad, but then to your friend, then the moment that technology is provided, we have to go and control your friend and say you're not allowed to increase your area because it was beneficial to him, not to the nation, right? So it is beneficial, but then benefit to who? And that's the under. So technology is good. It must be part of the solution. Whoever is against technology, a lot of environmentalists included, I think they're not. They're against national interest in if that is what they're saying. Let's not use technology. Let's not use medicine, don't take vaccine, and don't do this. It's the same attitude. But technology is like a knife. Knife is a technology. You can kill someone with. You can save a life in the operations room, surgery room. So the way we use it, it determines if that is a good solution or not. So technology, all those, infrastructure solutions, where Iran would have been where we are without dams and reservoirs. Is dam a bad technology? Does it have side effects? A lot. Environmental impacts? Absolutely. Would California be in this position without the infrastructure? No. Do they have impacts? Absolutely. Did we build too many dams in Iran? Yes. Did we dig too many wells in Iran? Yes. We overused pumps for pumping groundwater. We overused the technology called dams. We overuse, and now overusing water transfer, and soon we will be overusing desalination plants. Because the mentality that thinks that technology is the only solution is also as destructive as many other thoughts that we have, or those who are against the technology. So that is the issue. We need a portfolio approach, and technology would definitely be part of that portfolio. AI is a positive. You can do a lot of good things, but you can also kill people with it, right? With drones, you can assassinate people, you can rescue people. So how we use it, where we use it is problematic. Now back to that. If you go back to that slide on the use, so then this becomes also a point to ask. So if you look at this, you see Europe is well below 70%, right? And first thing we've got to notice here is Iran is a dry country. If you're anywhere that is dry, the share of the ag sector is huge. So California, what is the number in California, you think? Anyone here? The guess? 60? What else? 80? Yeah, so 80% in California. So if you rely on that number to say that's a bad performance, I think you're making a mistake. This graph doesn't tell us much. Now you got to ask where, how, what is this used for, and is it strategic or not? Like California 2014-15, the fights over almond. Right, we have that fight over watermelon in Iran. It's chubby and wet. We hate it. We think it takes all the water, and it's like everyone in the media, people are attacking watermelon. I asked Dr. Mesgaran later to actually comment on that and the numbers of it, real numbers, and see if this is really a back crop or not. But so that number doesn't tell us much. Because it's an abstract number. It's a reductionist narrative. And then, so where, how it's used, and then what can we do with it becomes an issue. As you said, so 8 billion is huge. But again, how, where, how are you going to use this water? Because we don't take the water back from the farmers, right? So again, during the bad drought in California, the problem was the efficiency was too high. No return flow, no groundwater recharge, and that became problematic. And then I think there are certain countries we can talk about later, but like certain countries that we use as example and refer to without, again, understanding the context. But
just two comments. It's very context specific, and you mentioned 70% California. Salinas Valley, the salad bowl of California, on the nation they call it, 90% of agriculture is from the groundwater, and they have been using it for 160 years, and no problem with water at all. Even in the past 20 years, there have been a drop in the amount of water they use, despite increase in irrigation systems. So it doesn't mean that if that number is high, so it's horrible. But overall, at the global scale, 80% of the agriculture is rain-fed. So the 20% is only irrigated, and with the
in Iran it's reversed.
Yeah, and Iran is
10% rain-fed.
So in Iran, in terms of acreage, it's about 50-50.
Yeah,
54,
equal.
55 is irrigation, but in terms of the production, 90% is coming from irrigated and only 10% from rain-fed, which means we have very low efficiency productivity in our rain-fed, despite 50% of the lands are allocated to rainfed. And back to this modern technology, yeah, I'm not, just want to clarify that I'm not against this drip irrigation. I love them actually. And so right now, they say about 2.4 million hectares of Iran have been equipped with this, and there is a capacity to increase it to 6 million. Now, my question is, why we're still at 2.4? Why it hasn't increased to 6? It's for at least 20, 30 years. You've been talking about this when the solution is modernizing the irrigation system. So if that was your solution, why you didn't even achieve that goal? It's still 2.4, and I see some statistics. They say, oh, we've added 200,000 hectares this year, and when you do the calculation, you should have equipped all 9 million hectares of irrigated lands in Iran already, through this drip irrigations, but still we are at 2.4. Again, it's the same argument as I meant for self-sufficiency. If that's important, why you haven't achieved it? Yeah.
May I add something here? Like, I mean, so this also, like, I think one thing to understand here is just there is no direct also, despite the fact that if you're dry and if you need irrigation, then your share of ag sector goes up. And then as there's this saying also that wherever you irrigate, eventually you run out of water. That's also a case. But you also see that there, Europe has water and still is not using it, but then it has a huge industrial sector. So that takes us to also the issue of economic return. Not only economic return, but also strategic return. Is it better to sell technology to other countries, sell industrial products, sell cars to other countries, or watermelon? And then that is the thing. Like, what do you trade here is very important, and then that takes us to those. So again and again, I think what we are not doing is we are not using water in a right way. Does it mean that we don't need reduction in water use? Absolutely, we need that. Does it mean that, so that is that? But then how to get there is dependent on that. Now, one other important thing here is that, 70% of the water in the world is in the good hands of farmers, agriculture sector. Who are they? Are we talking about the rich farmers of California, industrial farmers, mostly, some of them not, or subsistence farmers? If Iran manages to, improve the livelihood of its poor farmers, then the attitude of the government can be different. Then you can introduce technologies. Then you can use command and control. Then you can talk about removing subsidies, pricing water, trade of water. But as long as they're hungry, they're starving, and water for them is their livelihood, is their job, then the issue is different. That's why it is very hard to do anything about this sector. It's normally a poor sector. It's the poor sector of the poor countries, and it's highly political, right? Unemployment is far more concerning than water shortage, unfortunately. Fish dying, species becoming extinct, that's tomorrow's problem. That's the next generation's problem. Farmers going hungry, farmers losing jobs, farmers being displaced. You're talking about security issues. You're talking about people who have nothing more to lose and carrying guns. And that becomes the unsolvable problem, because then you have no choice. The only thing is to essentially, and that was what I said in that meeting I referred to, I said, as long as we cannot do anything about the livelihood of these farmers, we have to bribe our water and land to them so that we can keep this country safe.
But I think that another piece of this is, and as someone from Isfahan, which you would know if I spoke 2 words of Farsi, at some point the scarcity of waters does become an employment issue. If you don't have water to feed your land, you don't have subsistence, you don't have employment. So I think it's not whether it's an economic issue or it's a water issue. I think it's both at the end of the day, and I think that you're kind of pointing to that as well.
Yeah, but it's that point. It comes much further,
Right.
down the road. Despite a lot of things that are happening in Isfahan, and we get very concerned if east of Isfahan gets thirsty, because those are the loyal to the Islamic Republic. So then that side being thirsty is more important than the other side, and a lot of things happen, and they are suffering, but there is difference between even the city of Isfahan losing Zayan route and farmers becoming thirsty. And that point, you delay that. With the first rain, that problem would be resolved. Even if they're thirsty, you go in and pay and write the check. That year, things would be managed. So that's why you have this hydrologic cycle, which then creates a hydrologic cycle of management decisions, because treating this problem and so then it's not an easy solution. What we are talking about here is moving water to the industrial sector, right? Because if we want to be in a position that Europe is in, I have to invest more in the industrial sector. How do I do that? If I'm fighting with all the world, I can't import technology, there is no investment. I cannot, I'm under sanctions and I'm not thinking that way and I'm not acting smartly. So then, Isfahan, is it better to produce steel with your water, or corn, or rice in Lenjun, right? So which one is the correct decision? And that is the problem that we're having. So you got to create job opportunities in an alternative sector, alternative modes of livelihood. Then these small farmers that are subsistence farmers and are working on small lands, so then you can make that sector more efficient. So I strongly believe in Iran can produce more food, more strategic food. I'm not talking about tonnage because it can be misleading. More strategic food with less land area and less water use. But to do that, you got to send these people to another sector, and that's not an easy solution. There is another thing that I think people talk about the market side and investment side. There is another thing at the global level that we have to understand. Food in the world should remain cheap. And food, 70%. Food is the most important product of the water sector globally. Governments, world cannot afford a significant increase in the price of food. So that means that upstream, you don't have much incentives, because if the end product was more expensive, then along this supply chain, you could make other decisions. So that's why the market solution or economic thinking cannot necessarily work here, and political economy lens should be picked up to understand why this problem has become an unsolvable problem. We keep talking about better integrated, more integrated water resources management and removing subsidies, pricing water properly. But these are mission impossible. We're not talking about Iran. Other countries are in the same, are experiencing the same thing. But that's, I think, something to understand.
Yeah, and Dr. Mesgaran, you co-authored a paper that kind of touches on that. I'm just going to ask one quick question to Dr. Madani. So I know you take issue with certain thresholds, and I know there is a sense that most thresholds can be arbitrary, but can we, is there, I think, is it agreeable? Is it controversial to say Iran's water use is unsustainable? And then how should we measure that level of the sustainability of water use overall?
I think that, that was you don't think that I think water is
no, I just want to
sustainable. I paid
measuring the
in
terms of
so it's absolutely unsustainable, right? So I mean that has been you
We
know,
wouldn't be here
if I believed otherwise, I would have been in
Right.
Iran right now.
Yeah.
So it is unsustainable. Absolutely. The question is like, what is the definition of sustainability?
Right.
To
What's
me,
the good metric?
definition of sustainability is not like 80%, 70%. To me, the definition of sustainable water use is that, you know, so you're allocating it to the different sectors. You do the balancing, then your groundwater level is, so you're out of this water bankruptcy situation where you have exhausted your checking account, surface water, your saving account, you know, groundwater, and then you have all these water right holders that have more water rights than the available water. So that's not sustainable to me. Now, people think that still the tendency here is to address this gap through investment, more investment in technology, through increasing water supply. And then people say, oh, look at, you know, the countries in the south of the Persian Gulf, they're desalinating water, let's do this, why shouldn't we? Let's look at Israel, they're desalinating their water, or they're recycling wastewater, you know, they're doing wastewater reuse and recycling their wastewater, and that's how we should do it. Look at the Americans, they have built so many dams, and now they're saying, and those dams have not been really removed. The big dams are still there. Some of the smaller dams have been removed. So it's a lie. Now we want to make improvements. They tell us we should not be doing this. We tell them don't do water transfers more because Isfahan has become more thirsty, actually thirstier, as a result of providing more water, because with more water, you promote development in that region, and then what, you know, like what you did in Silicon Valley, like what you did in Las Vegas, right? So these are, or Los Angeles, you move water and then people go there, they like it, more investment, more development, and they keep asking for more water, and then you get stuck in this situation. What do I do? So in Iran, good example, like a few years ago, we had people in Khuzestan going on strike, right? And then demonstrations asking for water. What were they saying? One of the biggest, you know, one of the most important narratives, the strongest narratives there were like, all of these things are because of water diversion to Isfahan.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I guess like it's the economist in me that would like to have a good way of measuring when do we know it's sustainable, when do we know it's not sustainable? Because I get your point that there's going to be different allocations of water to industry, to, you know, households, and to agriculture, and people have different incentives and different kind of industries. But I think there is a point where no matter how you allocate the water, this graph could be all purple and it would still be unsustainable. If that's, I don't know, or if I'm wrong, tell me that I'm wrong.
No,
you know?
I think we have a lot of examples, and like we were just discussing this. Like you can use 10% of the water, like 10% of your water in a very bad way, and you know, pollute a lot of things. Then it's unsustainable. But you know, the point there, for example, like in the case of Isfahan, if you recall, so all of these things happened. People got shot. People died. A few months after, now we have people in Isfahan on Zayanda route asking for what? For more water transfer. Right. So if you're managing the country, what do you do? A few months ago, the other side, and both sides have the wrong narrative. This side thinks with more transfer, problem would be resolved, and we have seen that has not, you know, all those transfer projects has not resolved it. On the other side, they think that, you know, the source of problem is just the transfer, whereas no one is interested in revising the use. And then citing these examples without understanding them, right? So if you look at Israel, for example, the numbers are high. If you look at Qatar, the numbers are high. But do I worry much about water security in Qatar? No, I don't. I don't think Qatar is in the problem. I don't think Israel is in problem, you know, is having that problem, but these numbers can be misleading because if you look at the threshold, they're far above it. And then are they using technology? Absolutely. What we don't talk about is yes, the technology element is important and it helped Israel, but what helped Israel was decoupling its economy from water. Israel also had all these dreams about being self-sufficient in everything, but they're importing some food, right? They have also made damages and environmental impacts. We see the Dead Sea and, you know, all sorts of things happening. But what happened there is reducing the pressure of the economy on water. What we have done in the country, intentionally, unintentionally, I don't know, we have increased the pressure on the natural resources, including water. And if you're fighting with the rest of the world, when you're saying resistance economy, that means that I burn anything I have in order to keep, I want to stay warm. So no matter what my resource values are, the value of my resources, I just want to fight. And this is my ideology. And guess what? Like a country that is willing to make sacrifices over everything, like, the whole compromise, the development and everything over the nuclear plant or missiles, would they care about like Asiatic cheetahs? That's a joke, right? So, and then you go into the sanctions mode, and that means that you got to mine, you got to, you got to cut trees, and you got to sell raw material to the rest of the world, oil, all of these, even oil, like, you cannot sell your oil in the real market. So all those things you do in order to survive. So the more we become dependent on the natural resources, the worse the situation of our natural resources, including water, becomes. And that's the thing. So decoupling the pressure, and that decoupling can happen through a diversified portfolio of investment and through creating opportunities in the service sector, in the industrial sector for those farmers. And yes, so 50%, 54%, 46% split of land area, and we can make improvements in maybe rain-fed agriculture, but it's a dry country, so eventually that's not our competitive advantage, right? And that's something to be realistic about. And some other things can with and I think because I'm talking too much now, I can ask from you, Dr. Mesgaran. So can Iran be an exporter of some crops, if you're talking about greenhouses and so on?
Yeah, Dr. Mesgaran, if you can talk about, if you have any comments about sustainability, and then I would love to hear your answer to that as well.
I just wanted to point that this employment issue, I think one of the reasons that this situation has continued, this water issue, is that the government has not been able to create jobs in other sectors. So, and agriculture, for doing agriculture, you need land, and we have land, even though it's not very suitable as per our analysis, but it's still, you can still grow something on it. And then and you can pump the water. So it's not like other industries that you need a manufacturing or something. They have not been able to create jobs. So they allowed, so this is a map, even though it's not, you see most of it is red. This is analysis we did. Actually, Dr. Madani was part of this project. You can see about 14% of Iran's land mass is medium or above. I mean, good quality for agriculture, but still 50% of agriculture is happening on lands that are, based on our analysis, they are not suitable. So over the long term, they are producing something, but that's why we have low productivity. It's because it's not only, we're talking about water, but we tend to ignore the land. More than 60-70% of Iran, the soil organic matter is less than 1%. That's the organic matter is the essence of the soil when you're cropping, and 70% is that. We are the water issue is actually degrading soil. Soil salinization is one of the biggest issues now, because you pump water, it becomes saline, and you spread it in the soil, and then the soil is also salty. So this is a big issue happening on a daily basis. But the government allowed this happening because they weren't able to produce jobs. And for people, I made the same parallel with the education system. This growth, this mushroom growth of Azad universities and other institutes, it was just a relief for the government for a few years by time, so they can, young people can go to universities, studies, so they don't demand for a job. The same happened. Even though I think the self-sufficiency started as an ideology, over time it became the incompetency of the government to produce jobs. So they had to continue the business as usual. And I know now there are people in the government, wise people, that they know this was wrong. There are, I think, very few of them that still stick to that ideology, but they can't do anything at the moment. They do a major transform, and one of the reasons is that they don't have the legitimacy. This government doesn't have the legitimacy to make big reforms in agricultural sectors, and it's very huge. And dealing with farmers is very different compared to other people. I don't want to go that far, but yeah. So back to the you mentioned Israel and the competitive advantage, or what are some crops that we might be able to produce. Yes, we do have some really endemic crops that they are not water intensive, and we can grow them in Iran. We have about 1,800 endemic plants. So with endemic, what I mean is that you can only find these plants in Iran and nowhere else. And a lot of them are medicinal plants. So what we're doing right now, we are a big exporter of this type of plants to, for example, Germany, but we sell them as raw materials, unprocessed. 50% of the agricultural products in Iran, they're not processed. They are sold as raw materials. If you do a little bit of processing, you can sell them at a higher cost, and then you can reduce the number of acreage, reduce the amount of water. So we have these opportunities in agriculture rather than going for this very productionist and volume-based metric, produce huge amount. No, you need to think smart. We have a very good genetic diversity of many plants, species in Iran, even animals and crops, that we can actually sell the seeds like what California is. They look like pistachio. You can buy one pistachio and grow it. They have a patent and so on. You need to pay $1 or $2 for one single thing. What Israel is doing, Israel has the highest dollar per drop in the world. For each cubic meter, they earn about $4 to $5. What's the number in Iran? The total value of crops produced in Iran is about $38 billion. And we are spending about 80 cubic meter. So it's about 0.40 cents. That's the amount we are achieving. What is in California? California, the total value is about $55 billion. It's based on a statistic in 2023. The total amount of water used in agriculture is 42 cubic meter. So it's about 1.3, 1.4 dollar per cubic meter. So yes, if we go with those strategic plants and crops, we have this advantage. But with this looking at the volume and growing things in the dry on the outdoor, it's not going to help.
And yeah, you can see, agriculture has been a consistent and stable part of Iran's economy, but obviously as the economy has grown, it's stayed flat. So that means it's also gotten a smaller share. But on the other hand, if we look at the share of the agricultural sector in employment, it's also stayed stable, and it is a significant portion of the economy. I'm going to move to a couple of the audience questions, and I guess one of them that kind of goes hand in hand with the kind of the idea of the National Adaptation Plan, which again is just a proposal. There is. Are there any other solutions beyond kind of, if we can talk about that plan, if you would like, and the kind of the thought that goes behind that, and then any solutions beyond strategic crop choices, and also making sure farmers have alternatives, as you mentioned, to go to.
So you're referring to the national plan paper report, or okay,
yes.
Yeah.
So there are two things. There's a national plan developed by Iran.
I see. Thank you for clarifying.
So it's an adaptation paper that you guys have. And it's very important because there were conspiracies actually, and many people work on the government. It's important actually, I think, because many people independently work on that, and then it was, those people were under pressure for saying so this was prescribed by people in California, and this is against national interest. That distinction is important.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. So we, there should be changes in the crops that we are growing, and I always mention this, that the summer crops, they're not good for Iran. We have high evaporation in Iran, 2.5 meter. It's huge. and high temperature. So whatever you grow in Iran during summer, you need to irrigate it. And like a bad choice, for example, was corn. We didn't have corn 20 years ago, but now we have about 500,000 hectares of corn, and it's just a pumping water from the ground. So there are options like changing the crop, but this is not something you can enforce. You can't force growers that you need to grow, you should not grow or should grow. This is not something you can do. You can provide some incentives or penalizing. For example, you say if you're growing this crop, we would not give you subsidized fertilizer. Those type of things can happen, but still you can't force them. So changing the crop, again, modernizing agriculture, machinery, and those type of things. All these technologies can be useful. And again, changing the mindset that we should go and find and work on those very unique plant and crop species that we have, kind of entrepreneurial approach, as I mentioned, selling, for example, creating a good variety of wheat, because we have the genetic diversity, and then sell the seeds to others, like what Israel is doing. They have these pomegranates, which actually a lot of them have come from Iran, and they have these nice varieties that they're selling to other countries. So even some almonds varieties that they're growing in California comes from Israel. So these type of things can help. Agro-tourism, so we can use our villages and the way we do traditional agriculture as a touristic attraction. This is, I think, a very good thing, and this is a sustainable. It's very sustainable. People just go and see the way we are farming.
Be careful about the tourism in Iran.
Okay.
Now the Hormuz Island is an example. Like, no.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just joking, but yeah.
Yeah, so there are these options, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if I may...
question, you're discriminating against watermelon.
Watermelon, oh yeah.
Is that a good one?
Yeah, watermelon is a good, despite all this misconception that watermelon is using a lot of water. No, that's not true. Actually, watermelon is one of the very few crops, summer crops, that we have rain-fed watermelon in Iran. You can grow it rain-fed in some regions, and there are some people, they grow it for Japanese seeds. This is even using way less water. I had a graph, you didn't put it there, but that graph shows compare corn and watermelon. You can see the differences. Watermelon is not, you can eat it, don't be, feel guilty. It's a very good crop. In Kashan, in the middle of desert, in some places the water table is high, and they have rain-fed watermelon. Very beautiful watermelon growing there. I think I use beautiful because of Trump watching Trump watermelon. Yes.
No, I'm glad all the attention Esfan is getting regardless. Another question for both of you. Someone asked about, well, there's already been a lot of both environmental destruction and degradation and, obviously damage to our water systems. Is there any way to reverse that? Is that something premature to be thinking about? Should we how should we be thinking about that?
We got to be realistic. So how long are we talking about? 2 years, 10 years, 100 years? So some damages are irreversible. There are some damages that we cannot reverse, like, speaking of land subsidence, aquifer storage capacity, some wetlands that have gone, the ecosystems dependent on them, there's no way we can restore them. And we have a lot of failed trials, right? So the salt lakes in the United States, Lake Rumia, RLC, some of these things are, we got to be realistic about. I'm not an advocate for just saying it's impossible, because the moment you accept that Gulf Khuni cannot be recycled, then a lot of other things can happen. So you got to fight for them, but you got to be realistic and have a realistic plan. If you delay, and that's one of the reasons I keep using the term water bankruptcy instead of crisis, is that when you say crisis is a temporary thing. It's an extreme situation where everybody should get together to do mitigation. And what this message you're sending to everyone, all the stakeholders, to the public is that this situation is temporary and we can mitigate it. So let's invest in mitigation solutions, whatever that is. Like supply side mainly, some on the demand side, and then others are charging you for doing magic. Some people want to seed the clouds and rain for you. Some people charge you to do prayers and water for water. Like, I mean, so then you have all sorts of opportunists, like, groups that offer you solutions because you're desperate, and that's what you're communicating. Whereas I say, like, okay, now if you're dealing with a bankrupt person, merchant, a business, is it better to give it more loans and increase, like, a better line of credit, or help that person admit that there's a state of bankruptcy, file for bankruptcy, let all the stakeholders know that there's a big, huge gap there, and the business model has failed. We got to admit that the business model has failed. And one other thing, the moment you do that, then you communicate to people that, yes, mitigation is part of the solution, but you also need adaptation. In some of these places, there's no way we can go back in short term. I don't know, like, once we are gone and all of us are not here on this planet, like, some stuff might come back. Nature is very kind and surprises us, but a lot of things would not be back. And I think we got to be realistic about that and communicate to people, like, people were very kind to me. I could see when during the recent movements, women life freedom in Iran, people were putting, like, cabinet members of the future governments, and whoever didn't matter who the head was at that moment, at the beginning, not now, but they were putting me always as the environmental minister. And I said, like, that's the worst job you can have after, because there's no way you can, like, you don't have the Moses stick to go there and do this, and then, Lake Rumia is back and Zayan Darut starts flowing. And if you're communicating that to people, that with the change of a regime, then water would, like, fountains would be all over the place and the country would go green, you're a liar. And I think that's very scary. And a lot of people think that way because then we have these reduced, like, reductionist narratives that we have given to people without explaining this complexity. And guess what? Like, how many things did we talk about? And, so we talk about sanctions, we talk about economy, we talk about the need for investments, we talked about the need for a change of thought, we talk about strategic thinking about investment, we even pushed back the idea that the agricultural sector must be shut down, and this is something a lot of people even in Iran think is the solution. We talk about irrigation efficiency improvement, like, so it's a very complex landscape, and if we are fair, we got to do comparative studies. We got to look at, like, other countries and see that those countries that didn't have the revolution also experienced some stuff. And we got to be also realistic, not an apologist for a system that is making a lot of mistakes. We shouldn't hide corruption. We should not defend every project, but lots of things there So the answer is unfortunately not. But you got to admit, right? And I think that's the problem. I once wrote about this. Something about Mard Chalghe Khepel or Mard Chalghe some Kachal or something. I don't know what it was, but I said there's this guy that who never done any exercise, was a meat taker, smoker, drinker, all of that. And then in his 50s and 60s, the guy cannot breathe, and he always ignored these things. And now he goes to doctors, and doctors say he's Mard Chalghe Puldar. So he was a rich guy. So then he says, doctor, give me a medicine, take me to the surgery room and fix this issue. And every doctor he goes to says that, look, like, I can give you more medicine, but you got to lose weight. You got to quit drinking, and then, you have to do exercise. So, and there's no way you can, run and do this and that. And he said, this guy doesn't understand. So then he goes to all the doctors in town, and they all provide the same answer. But now he's very happy because he went to a fortune teller who charged him a lot, and now has something in his pocket or whatever that something is on it, the prayers or some magic words, and he feels happy, and nothing has changed. Iran is delusional about the solutions also because it's going to the fortune tellers, not to the doctors who are saying this is unsustainable. You cannot solve this problem by leaving some of your habits. But also when you're in 60s and 70s, the opportunities you have are becoming more and more limited, and that's the problem. An aging system, aging infrastructure, aging nature, like everything is deteriorating in Iran, and all of these are connected. And the longer we delay this, the less opportunities we have, and that's very sad indeed, and very, very sad, because a lot of these things are irreversible and impossible to solve, but we don't see that change of thinking. One thing about what you mentioned, indeed, the government, the second government of President Rouhani banned rice cultivation in many except for 3 provinces, or even 2, I think 2 provinces in the north. This was banned. So what we also need is some constant situations of drought, and that's very sad to say. But if it's a prolonged drought, then the political cost of reforms and transformation drops. And I mean, even if you think about California, when it came to groundwater, it had funny rules or no rules. But the long drought and crazy drought and extreme drought and unprecedented drought helped the governor of California, all the stakeholders, to pass some new regulations regarding groundwater, to tell Southern California that they got to save 25%, and that happened. But the cost of reform was huge, and that's the situation that we have. But again, not only today we are water bankrupt. And water, water is a resource we don't have plenty of, but we are also bankrupt in terms of natural gas that we have plenty of, like we're second in the world, right? Because the mentality is the proper mentality is not there. They don't understand or analyze the solution. And even when you talk about job creation, Dr. Mesgaran, I don't think people ever in a lot of these discussions, people talk about the alternative mode of livelihood. They're not thinking about this that there is a need to address the water problems, agricultural problems, environmental problems by investing in those sectors. Even the thinking is not there, because the Minister of Agriculture wants to produce more food and protect the farmers. The Minister of Water needs to provide more water and sell more water to be able to afford all of that, and at the same time that they're supposed to protect water, and it doesn't make sense. It's conflict of interest. And then the Environment Department doesn't have the power, and when the situation becomes worse and worse, air pollution, this and that, then you don't have much room to respond.
To answer your question, I always compare environment with the historical monuments. Consider, for example, Persepolis, 2,500. You can destroy it in Zabun Amlal in one day. It takes you one day to destroy everything. And it's the same environment. We talk about this Sarve Abaru, a couple of thousand years old. You can cut it in one night, but it would take you another 2,000 years to reestablish it. So a lot of environmental monuments, they have this tendency that if they're gone, or and to restore them, it takes time. So, and that's very sad. But there are cases that you can recover. So it's very dependent on how the environment has been damaged, what's the situation, yeah.
Can you go back to your land suitability map? So even so not only we destroy environment, but also we destroy resources, right? So north of Iran, that's the best land you got. All right, that's the most productive, that's the best land. What are we doing there? Transforming the best land into small, houses, because now there's so that's It's not essential. It's beautiful. It's good to have those. But then we are turning this into real estate, and then we are farming in the red areas. This is not a sanctions related issue. This is being done. This is not being coordinated. This is something you can address. So I think it's also very important at the same time that we talk about a pressured economy, resistance economy, and all those things, that the opportunities that become more limited, and then the fact that you don't have the vision. You're myopic, like your myopia is killing this country, is destroying this country, because you're not thinking, just about the future. And we see examples after examples, like failures after failures, that, okay, if you develop too closely to the river, you gotta get flooded at some point. Doesn't matter if you're in Khuzestan or California, Sacramento, or so that happens. And I think this is the issue, because we're talking about the nation, but when it comes to those decision makings, and I'm thinking about my riding and my region as the parliament member. I want the petrochemical industry and facility in my region. I want more permits for my farmers, and I want this and that and that and that, and then that, so we reinforce this process of environmental destruction of Iran and irreversible destruction of Iran, and it becomes worse and worse because the sick body doesn't have the chance to address its solution. This is a system that is suffering from cancer. Cancer is affecting all organs, and then we are after plastic surgery. Let's do a nose job and fix the problem. It's not going to work that way. You need a if you need chemo is very expensive, and it needs courage. It's very painful. Right, and that's like, so political. Does anyone have that courage? Does anyone have the legitimacy of doing that? Let's say the president of Iran or supreme leader of Iran, the leader of Iran, decides to do. Can they do that? Would people allow that? Right, and that's the thing. If they remove subsidies, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And that becomes also a legitimacy issue when there is no trust, because farmers don't believe your words. Different groups don't. Even people working for you, for your government, don't believe your narratives, and then you cannot implement a change. And that is also, like, the social capital is an important thing that must not be forgotten. Without that capital, you cannot implement solutions. People got to be patient, got to be resistant, and fight for it. I think stand with the pain for a long time if we want to reverse this trend.
Mm-hmm. We're close to the end of our time, so I want both of you to give some kind of concluding remarks. Any, have to give anything hopeful, but if you do, that would be encouraged. Would you mind starting, Dr. Mesgaran?
Yeah, so to conclude again, self-sufficiency is not the right choice, especially with this way of doing it. We need to go after food security, and it's not bad, it's not embarrassment, it's not a shame to import food, because I see this discussion even I have heard this in a newspaper, read in the newspaper, that Supreme Leader Khamenei is saying it's a shame that we are importing fodder mean yonja, alfalfa, for cattle. That's not a shame at all. You need to look at your resources, what resources you have, the competitive advantage, and let's those science and decides rather than ideology. That's what I would end with.
Yeah, I think shame is selling raw material and at a very cheap price. That's what we should be ashamed of. With a country that is so resourceful, can do much better in the global market. You can sell your critical minerals and your oil and gas at a cheap price, but you can process them and sell them at a much higher price. I think that we have to think about those. Yes, I sound very pessimistic, but I think being realistic is the way forward, we have to be realistic if we want to help Iran. We have to put the lens of science on and then think about all these like incredible scientists that we have and with the love they have for their nation. They want to help, they want to remain factual and apolitical and help a nation that deserves help. The country still has a lot. We have many countries that are doing much worse than us in the region. When it comes to the environment and water, we are a nation that is very environmentally aware. At the time I was in the government, we had 850 registered and approved environmental NGOs. We're not talking about Switzerland, this is Iran. And to get all those approvals, like you have to go through a very long process. So the fact that we even talk about this and these people, incredible people, are also here is that we, it's a nation that understands a lot of these things, appreciates these problems and ask for a change, and that ask for a change has also led to a lot of things in the country. I think you just think about it last few days, Mian Kale and how we reacted to it. This, what happened in Bandar Abbas and how many people talked about the environmental impacts, right? So this is really good that we have these people, a new generation who thinks differently and wants things to be done differently, and maybe also some people in the leading, the powerful who hopefully have realized that not only their water strategies and agricultural strategies and plans are not sustainable, but also their development model and diplomacy and other things are not sustainable. I'm just hoping for the best for Iran and whatever the people of Iran want. And I think what we need to do, and a lot of scientists here in the room, we gotta care about one thing: improvement of the lives of the Iranians and generating solutions. Any political group is more than welcome. Islamic Republic is more than welcome. Its opposition is more than welcome to go and implement those solutions if they can. But we have to produce science and stay away from politics if we claim that we are wearing a scientific hat and writing something. And of course, all scientists are more than welcome to be political activists, but they have to clarify where and when they're doing what. Thank you so much for this debate, and thank you all for coming.
I think talking about Iranian people is a great way of bringing us to hope and motivation and thinking of resilience. So thank you both for joining us, and hopefully I'm sure we're going to continue this conversation, continue doing the scientific work that's so important, and thank you all for participating and joining us.